All right, we are back with the recap of Super Bowl 59 to get straight into it. They debuted a new score bug. Since this game was going to be on Fox, it seems like they do that every few years or so. So it was going to be interesting to see what it looked like for this iteration. And it personally, I think it's going to take some time to get used to. I mean, there's not a lot of graphics behind it. You have your stats to the right or left depending on the team that has their offense on the field. I mean, there's less clutter. You can see more action down there. It's not so glaring that it's in the way, but I don't know. I don't know about it. Some people certainly were giving it some hate. So, I mean, it's just going to take time. It's fresh in everyone's mind. As it continues to get utilized in more games, maybe people will come to accept it a little more. I'm not saying that it's bad, but I was a little thrown off at first, I won't lie. So we'll see about that. As far as the actual game itself started out, the Eagles would get the ball and automatically they would try to establish the run, but the Chiefs, and this is going to be a theme for the entire night, they prevented explosive run plays from Saquon Barkley. The second that he got near the front seven, they did their absolute best to clamp down. And within just a play, all it took, you're trying to get a 4-yard run to set the tone. But right after that, they go into passing it to Devontae Smith, though it was a good pass by Jalen Hurts as Devontae Smith ran an out route. They would try to continue to go back to it, but nothing really panned out there. So Jalen Hurts on 3rd and long would take it upon himself to scramble and get near the first down. But of course, they were going to go for it on 4th down here, where they decided to take a shot to A.J. Brown. And he came down with the football. He got great leverage on Trent McDuffie, who was going to get the assignment on him all night long. And he beat him off press, but the refs did throw a flag and called offensive pass interference on him. And when you look at it again, he literally decides to push his helmet down and push him out of the play. I guess some people had a few things to say about the call, but realistically, I had no problem with it. It was more so the fact that A.J. Brown decided to even interfere with McDuffie at that point. Like, the ball was placed perfectly, and it had the right trajectory to where, regardless, it would have hit A.J. Brown right in the hand. And if Trent McDuffie could potentially make a play on the ball, there's a good chance that A.J. Brown, as physical as he is, could wrestle it away from him in the course of action. But he had him beat off press. So I don't really get why the fuck that happened. But that's neither here nor there. The Eagles would then punt the ball from there. And the Chiefs would get the ball back, where the first couple of plays made it seem like they were gonna try to be as effective and methodical as they possibly could be. It had been working for them for long enough, so why not stick with that? Let's just say that the Eagles' defense made them change that around quickly, especially that front four, because 2nd down, 3rd down, back to back, they send tremendous pressure. And on that 3rd and long, you have Mahomes trying his best to scramble around. And he has to throw a fuck it ball off platform because Jalen Carter gets pushed right into him. And the pass was incomplete. Could have been picked off right there. So both defenses force their offenses to punt. in a pretty good sequence of first possessions. The Eagles would change that rather quickly after Saquon Barkley got just a 2-yard run to open up the drive. Jalen Hurts would throw a pretty easy and open pass to Dallas Goedert. They would continue to try to carve it up, although Saquon Barkley would get stuffed. Had a play for negative yardage here even. Then on 2nd and long, you would have Jalen Hurts throw the ball down the field on an absolute string to Jahan Dotson for what was believed to be a touchdown, but he ended up being tackled just short of the goal line. No worries. You know, it can be any given game, even in the Super Bowl. You know, when they get in a fucking situation like this, the damn tush push is coming out, motherfucker. And they got down, they pushed, and Jalen Hurts got in for another vulture touchdown run to give the Eagles the 7-0 lead in the first quarter of the ball game. The Eagles defense would continue to maintain their pressure. Continue to. They tried to offset that with quick passes and short runs, but they could not establish the run at any point in this ball game. And they would get themselves into a manageable 3rd and long, but the Georgia Bulldog and Nolan Smith Jr. got back there and wreaked havoc, forcing an errant throw and forcing them to go 3 and out. The Eagles would continue to drive down the field after this, starting back on their own 20-yard line and making good progress overall as Jahan Dotson was continuing to get involved. They would also pan the camera over to Chris Jones, or show that he was getting work done on his neck, because for a little second he had suffered a neck injury, and that was going to be crucial for the Chiefs defense overall. Like, yes, Chris Jones is getting older, but he is still one of the premier pass rushers you can have in the league today. If they were to lose him, it was going to be completely detrimental to their success. They would get themselves into a situation where they seemingly stopped the Eagles. I mean, they sacked Jalen Hurts here with George Karlaftis' help, but it's too bad that Charles Omenihu decided to be a dumbass and jump off sides. Clearly, too. Thus, the drive was extended. Now, they would get Jalen Hurts down for a negative gain on this subsequent first down anyways. Then they would force 3rd and 10, where Jalen Hurts would throw a very stupid pass off his back foot to Brian Cook. Now, granted, it pinned the Chiefs back deep instead of giving them optimal field position, but it just wasn't a smart play at all. Would be literally the only mistake he made of the night, too. The only mistake he made of the night. Patrick Mahomes would take the ball from the 2-yard line and try to create space. But that still wasn't enough. And Travis Kelce even, on a pretty solid pass, had a chance to come down with the football, but ultimately he would drop it, forcing another 3 and out for the Chiefs offense. Now, granted, their defense would hold on this next possession, and it was looking bad after A.J. Brown got a contested catch on Trent McDuffie that helped them drive down the field. But again, they continued to hold Saquon Barkley in check, and it also came down to a 3rd and 5 in which Justin Reed made a great open field tackle on a scrambling Jalen Hurts to stuff him just short of the line to gain, and ultimately Jake Elliott would make a 48-yard field goal to give them a 10-0 lead. Shit got worse from there. It hit the fan completely. Completely. All right. Imagine this. First and second down saw Josh Sweat give Patrick Mahomes hell on both plays. Had that man dancing in the pocket and trying his hardest to run, but he could not hide at all. Got him down and made him lose yardage on both plays. Then on third and extremely long, you had Mahomes throw a risque pass. And in came Cooper DeJean, the Iowa rookie, in the slot. It was underthrown as shit. He was trying to get it across the middle to, I believe, it was Marquise Brown. And DeJean, worked the shit out of him. Now he's running the opposite way, trying to get in the end zone. And ultimately, after a solid flurry of moves at the tail end, he does just enough to get a pick six, giving the Eagles a 17-0 lead. Had major significance in multiple facets. For one, not only was it Saquon Barkley's birthday, so naturally he was trying his best, despite being held in check, he was trying his best to perform and win the ball game, which would be the ultimate birthday gift for him. It was also Cooper DeJean's birthday on this Super Bowl night. So that's definitely something to go and make a play like that, which also happened to be his first NFL interception. The culmination of everything. Even without an interception, he'd had a pretty solid rookie season, as he and Quinyon Mitchell, fellow rookie from Toledo, became one of the better cornerback duos in the league pretty much instantly. But to nab your first interception and a pick six in the biggest game of the season, on the biggest stage, on your birthday, that's something that he probably will not forget about at all. And also, DeJean was the very first player since Steve Van Buren all the way back in the 1950s with a touchdown in a title game on their birthday. Goes back that far. So, hey, that's very, very great work for him. And I honestly thought that Saquon Barkley was going to be the second since Steve Van Buren to do exactly that. That did not happen. But it's safe to say that they were fine with that, because the next possession would see them try to establish the run again, but they were stopped very short on each occasion. Then Mahomes would actually try to throw the football here, but he wouldn't even get a chance to get the ball off, because in came Milton Williams crashing from the center of the fucking line and getting him down on the ground for a 7-yard loss. The Eagles would be held in check. George Karlaftis would get a hold of Jalen Hurts after a Landon Dickerson penalty, forced him back even further. But more undisciplined play on their end would ensue as Nick Bolton would get an unnecessary roughness penalty that extended the possession for a little bit. Now, they're lucky that the Eagles didn't do anything with this. Granted, though, after punting the ball, you want to know what Patrick Mahomes does. He gets pressured to the point where he is forced to throw one of the worst throws I've ever seen, and he gets picked off and lurked by a diving Zach Bond as he's trying to once again target Marquise Brown. Shit is crazy. Now, granted, it was an egregiously bad decision. I do get that the O-line allowed the pressure to get there in the first place, and it took Patrick Mahomes off platform. But still, with the way the coverage looked, there was just no shot in hell that he even considered trying to make that play happen. There was no point. There was absolutely no point. And it helps that Zach Bond is the one making this play too. Wasn't even in playoff contention with the Saints last season. And after having a career year and being a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, he managed to make this play and give the Eagles another chance at just completely getting all of the momentum in their favor, which would happen within just 2 plays, as A.J. Brown would get a good catch off of an in-breaking route and got one of the easiest touchdowns he'll ever really get in his lifetime. I mean, as simple as that. Eagles would go up 24-0, and it would stay that way going into halftime. Now, in each of the 3 Super Bowl wins the Chiefs have had in this decade alone, all of them did happen after they came back from double-digit lead. But things were getting drastic. They made it so difficult on themselves with just stupid mistake after stupid mistake, undisciplined play, and honestly, I personally feel, and I've said this, I feel as though they got so caught up in trying to chase the history that they forgot how to just play the game presented in them. They didn't even treat it like a football game at all. They were treating it as something other, as something far beyond, and it worked against them. Because they were so hell-bent on trying to secure a 3-peat that they just denied all willingness to stick to fundamental ball. That was going to have to change around, and rather quickly in the second half, if they even wanted any chance to come back and make this a ball game. They would make very minimal progress before they got right back into having a porous offensive line and allowing both Jordan Davis and Josh Sweat to get back there, sack Patrick Mahomes. Then on the third down, he has to just scramble out again. And no, he doesn't pick up the first down. Doesn't feel that he can even stay in the pocket anymore because everything is just crumbling on that O-line. They could not protect him in any sense of the word. So he felt the need to get out of there. And they would have to punt again. The Eagles would take 6 minutes and 42 seconds off the clock after that and kick a field goal. The Chiefs had to get touchdowns. They had to do something on offense at some point. Time was ticking. If the Eagles could take off that much time on one drive and settle for just a field goal, like the ball was in their court now, you had to get quick scores. They didn't seem to get that memo. Like, they would pick up a few first downs, but you would get in a situation where they were in 3rd and long after trying to run the ball and picking up just a yard on 2nd down. Travis Kelce would get a 9-yard gain for one of the first catches he had all night. And then you would have Mahomes trying to pass, but Vontae Maddox would get in there and swat the ball down. Then, in what would ultimately be the dagger, you would have Jalen Hurts throw a fucking dot to Devontae Smith for a 46-yard touchdown. At that point, the game was effectively over. With that being said, Mahomes would make some good connections with Xavier Worthy as he would combine for 2 catches and 74 yards on this next drive, including a play where Worthy had to come back to the ball and Mahomes was scrambling to his right, fired a rocket. But where was all that energy earlier on when you needed to try to go toe-to-toe with this offense? Nowhere to be found when it mattered. They got way behind 8 ball. The Eagles would kick a field goal yet again, and the Chiefs, it was highly unlikely that they were going to do anything at this point, but with this sack fumble that Milton Williams forced, it was effectively a wrap. I mean, literally, they killed him. Like, you had Milton Williams crashing in and getting him down, but also in the course of that, you had Jalen Carter smacking him in the face. Now, second fucking week did Jalen Carter's just been on a tear, to be honest. Like, he's definitely a freak of nature when it comes to playing the D lineman position, D tackle position. But, bruh, this entire playoff run, you see any team getting smacked in the mouth, he's gonna make sure the quarterback feels it, I guess, literally. And that's what happened here. Perfect microcosm and summation of how this game absolutely went for the Chiefs. They couldn't do anything. They had to take a beating. I find it pretty ironic, too, that I was watching this with a quad of TVs, and on the TV to the top left, right above the Super Bowl, on ESPN, they had on Mike Tyson's greatest hits. So that tells you everything you need to know about how this thing went. The Eagles tried to take it easy on them a little bit. I mean, they kicked the field goal with Jake Elliott, and then they subbed out all of their starters. Kenny Pickett got reps in the Super Bowl and would eventually end the game off being a Super Bowl champion. Just think about that for a second. That's neither here nor there, all right? The Chiefs would get a couple more touchdowns in as DeAndre Hopkins would actually use his fucking hands and bring one in. And then Xavier Worthy would also get a 50-yard touchdown catch. An absolute dot from Mahomes, but again, too little too late. Just a lot of aggressive stat padding. And the Eagles would ultimately win the ball game 40-22. Now, the 34-point deficit that the Chiefs had faced, that's how you knew shit was bad. They were the second team to, well, their 34-point deficit was the largest faced in the big game since the Seahawks-Broncos game, in which they were down by 36. Now, again, optimally, you're looking at the box score. You're not saying that it's as bad as that Super Bowl, particularly. But, yeah, this panned out to be one of the worst. One of the worst. I'll say that. Especially for Chiefs fans. I mean, my goodness. And Mahomes also, with those interceptions, became the second quarterback in the big game to throw interceptions on back-to-back attempts. Because, like I said, on the drive after the pick six, he didn't even get a chance to throw the football. He got sacked. The Chiefs just crumbled all over. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, they didn't control the ball at all. They got dominated in the trenches. They couldn't convert on third down. They could not run the football at all. Just 49 yards rushing. They had 3 costly turnovers. And also, the O-line gave up 6 sacks. I'll go over the Eagles' numbers in a little bit, but let's focus on the Chiefs first, since they're the losing squad. Okay, Mahomes, again, a lot of padding here. 2 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 257 yards passing, and 25 yards rushing. Worthy had 8 receptions for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yet another big fuck you to the Bills. But again, it still didn't count. Kelce would have 4 receptions for 39 yards and would actually set the record for most receptions in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I believe most receptions in Super Bowl history for Kelce, if I'm not mistaken. Wouldn't mean much of anything. It wouldn't mean much of anything. Like, all of them came late, and he had crucial drops that just hurt their chances. Also, DeAndre Hopkins with just 2 receptions, 18 yards, and a touchdown. Touchdown's fine, but one of those drops came when they were down 17-0 near the end of the first half with a chance to at least take some momentum back. So that drop ended up being very, very important. As for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts made his statement. He balled the fuck out and gave everyone the full spiel of what he is truly capable of. Like, you have to give that man his respect for that. The sheer amount of shit that this man has gotten for his quote-unquote underwhelming passing, granted, in certain areas it was a bit legitimate, but you think about these last 2 ball games for the Eagles, and they had the most combined points in a championship game and Super Bowl game, with 95, with that offense running all over everyone in the Commanders game. And when the time called for him to step it up in the passing game, he did it. He was efficient as hell in the Commanders game. And in this game, in a match where Saquon Barkley had just 25 rushes for 57 yards and also 40 receiving yards, he stepped up and he made plays. He hung in the pocket and delivered you some throws. He improvised and made some plays up on the fly. He got out of the pocket when there were open rushing lanes and gashed the Chiefs defense. Granted, that's on them because for a good amount of them, they didn't spy. Jalen Hurts isn't necessarily the fastest person, but he is a great downhill runner for a rushing quarterback. To give him any amount of space like that, you're just asking for trouble, and he made them pay more often than not. Like I said, that interception was the one mistake he made on the biggest stage, and the one mistake he made in the last 2 ball games. When the season is on the line, when the rights to proclaim yourself as champion are on the line, he did that. 72 rushing yards and a touchdown, with those rushing yards making him the quarterback with the most in a Super Bowl game, breaking the record he set against the Chiefs 2 years ago with 70. And again, a game that debatably he outplayed Mahomes in. Now, there's no debate about this particular one. Yes, the team, when you get to a place where you're beating a team 40-6, it is a great day for a football team. But you have to appreciate what Jalen Hurts did. It's tremendous stuff. Yes, the defense, after it got, up to when it got to 34-0, shut them down. But Jalen Hurts had all the questions surrounding his ability to keep that offense well ran. Nothing was left on the table here. Nothing. 17 of 22 passing for him and 221 yards passing with 2 touchdowns. And again, that interception being it. Devontae Smith had 4 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown had 3 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown. Jahan Dotson had 42 receiving yards, and Dallas Goedert had 27 receiving yards on 2 catches. Zach Bond had the interception and pass deflection and 7 tackles. Josh Sweat had 2.5 sacks and 2 TFLs. Milton Williams had 2 sacks and 2 TFLs. Jordan Davis had a sack. I'm not too sure of who Hunt is, but he had a half a sack. And we're not even accounting for the amount of pressures that a lot of these individuals forced. Like Jalen Carter didn't record a single stat, and he didn't have to because his impact was still felt. If you had the lineman committing to double teaming him, that freed up somebody else to engineer some pressure in there. Just a good distribution of talent all along that defensive line, and it showed. Now, some of these guys are going to be free agents, and it's going to be hard to retain them, but we'll see. And honestly, when it comes down to it, you have some history being set. I mean, even with a rough game, Saquon Barkley became the second running back to win the rushing title, the Offensive Player of the Year, and a Super Bowl in one season, while also resetting the record for the most overall rushing yards in a campaign. While he won't get the record of breaking the 2,105 rushing yard mark in the regular season, he does have the most in a single season all time, including the postseason. You can't take that away from him. And he did sit out the 17th game. So he had a fair shot at it like pretty much everybody else. Jalen Hurts also became the first quarterback with 10 passing and rushing touchdowns in the postseason. Not necessarily the flashiest, but it was effective. And it was gut-wrenching. I mean, literally, they had 37 minutes of possession. While they averaged less yards a play, they had the luxury of being able to run pretty much anything they wanted. They had 70 plays compared to KC's 49. And at multiple points, the Eagles had more pass attempts at a certain point than the Chiefs did plays in opponent territory. It took them until that possession on which they ended up scoring to get in opponent territory. That's how bad the Eagles defense did them. And that's why I'd have to say that the biggest winners of this particular game would be Jalen Hurts, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, and Vic Fangio. Damn, what? Wow, okay. But yeah, seriously, those guys, all 4 of them, huge winners. That's not to take away anything from anyone else. Oh, well, yeah, Saquon Barkley as well. Yes, all those guys. Jalen Hurts can now call himself a Super Bowl MVP. Howie Roseman, after in the mid-2010s being relieved of his duties temporarily, he got another shot after where he recognized what happened when he wasn't in that position of power as a general manager. Got him right back in there. They instantly get contention yet again. And then in this decade, you get multiple matchups against an incumbent dynasty. And you give in both of those Super Bowl matchups, you give them your best. But things got so bad after the first one, because the season after, you collapsed tremendously in the final 7 games or so, and the playoffs as well. A typical general manager in that situation could have very well panicked about the state of the team and could have started making all of the craziest moves imaginable, in which some of them might have even been unnecessary or detrimental, but could have invoked that much fear in the authority figure that they just needed to start doing whatever. No. The moves he made in the offseason were very calculated. To get a rookie cornerback duo like that, to get Zach Bond from a crumbling Saints squad, to continue to bolster up that front seven, and also be sure to retain the weapons that you do have in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Neither of them have an extremely expensive contract for the wide receiver position because they got ahead of the curve to the point where by the time a player like CeeDee Lamb signed his contract extension, the Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown deals looked very good. Also, again, Saquon Barkley, they coexist as winners here. I mean, Saquon Barkley has been literally waiting for this moment forever. The Giants were not going anywhere, and they clearly did not have his best interest at heart. They tried to treat that man like shit. You get a person out of there who you know has been productive, and you bring him into a system like this with the O-line that they have. I kid you not. They had a stat that said that they are the average, in terms of average, they are the heaviest and tallest offensive line in Super Bowl history. And it's not even just the fact that they're tall and they have the size. They are actually fucking talented. Every single one of them. All of them are very elite. Very dangerous mixture. And you saw that over the course of the entire season with a Saquon Barkley who was a man on a mission. He was hungry to prove people wrong. He felt that he was disrespected, and you're the Eagles. You give him a 1-year deal to take a chance on him because anything could happen. And it paid off for you tremendously. With one of the more successful seasons a running back has ever had. Hall of Fame trajectory, instantly. And you may be willing to retain him for a little longer. That's how you do it. Nick Sirianni, as far as he goes, they quite literally ran the table. I mean, after their loss in early September to Tampa Bay, they could have gotten his ass up and out of there. And they were calling for it tremendously. And for the rest of the season, whether the wins were a little ugly in some cases or completely dominant, he got the job done. He rallied his team to victory, as a true leader should be doing. Vic Fangio has also been a vaunted defensive coordinator for so long. I mean, the Dolphins moved on from him after getting punched in the mouth the way they did in the wildcard round. And he's been very maligned in many of the stops that he had been at previously. So the Eagles are also taking a chance on him. And it paid off yet again, as they would be one of few teams in NFL history to win the Super Bowl and be the number one defense in the NFL. The first to do so since the 2015 Broncos. And you felt that defense through and through in this ball game. So, hey, ball in the season for the Eagles. I guess a lot of people aren't necessarily happy about it, but I know that the Eagles fans are certainly having the time of their lives right now. They're going to have a parade on Valentine's Day celebrating the victory. So, I mean, the shit already got bad. I've already seen crazy shit going on in Philadelphia immediately after the fucking game. So imagine what's going to happen then. But they deserve it, and they've worked hard for it. Literally. As for the Chiefs, and again, that's what makes this thing so good for the Eagles. Like in back-to-back, well, not back-to-back, but in 2 of the last 3 years, you've went either toe-to-toe with this dynasty on the biggest stage. And you gave it your best shot the first time. You came back around the second time and you smacked them down and you slayed the beast. There's no other way to put it. It's not necessarily the end of the dynasty for the Chiefs, because they are still a team that has appeared in AFC Championship games every single season Mahomes has been there. Every single season he has been a starter, at least. They have been in the AFC Championship. They've always got a chance to contend when he's under center. But clearly some things have to be improved upon. They're probably going to have to rebuild that offensive line just a little bit. Because it doesn't help that you have a player like Joe Thuney, despite him playing somewhat productive, have him playing out of position the entire season. That doesn't help your cause. I'm pretty sure that Trey Smith is a free agent. They may very well lose him. So it looks like you have to get down to the brass tacks with that. They also need to fire Matt Nagy. They need to fire Matt Nagy. Because, let's call it what it is. No, in terms of personnel, they don't have the most bona fide superstars out there right now. I get that part. But even then, you know that the Chiefs' offense can be even more explosive than they had been this last season. Like, yes, they won ball games. They won one-score ball games over the course of the past couple of years now. We get that part. But they're so god-awful, it seems, that if you talk to the right people, they're going to tell you that it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. And to be honest, if they want to maintain a dynastic status, this kind of loss may have been something that they needed. Maybe. Because, yes, there's something to be said about bits and pieces of continuity. Though, again, Brett Veach has definitely made moves when he's needed to get quality guys at the right time and contend that way. But from a staffer perspective, obviously Andy Reid's going nowhere. But Matt Nagy should. Their offense seemed paltry all year long. Mahomes had one of his worst outputs, if not the single worst output he's had in his career. All across the board. It's a testament to how great Mahomes is in the big moments that he still managed to make a Super Bowl despite that decline. But there aren't really too many things that suggest to me that it's replicable. So you have to try to elevate in this moment. It's going to come down to that. Seriously. There were some other news over the course of the last week. But I will start with everything that pertains to the Super Bowl because viewership numbers did come in. And they stated that Super Bowl 59 reined in an average of 126 million US viewers, making it the most viewed in NFL history, despite not necessarily being that good. But I think that, again, the idea of a team like the Chiefs making that kind of history and the Eagles having that underdog mentality made the collective fan base want to tune in and want to see what happened. Like, I'm sure that numbers dipped a little bit as the game went on. Well, maybe not. There are probably some people out there who wanted to see the Chiefs go out like this. Many people wanted to see the Chiefs go out like this, to be honest with you. There's a good chance that it was sustained. And as far as the Super Bowl goes, the halftime show with none other than Kendrick Lamar reined in an average of 133.5 million viewers, as they actually detailed today, making it the most viewed halftime show. Now, there have been a wide variety of opinions on the show itself. And a lot of the comments have to do with not understanding the symbolism that Kendrick Lamar wanted to convey, not necessarily favoring the set list. There weren't a lot of hits on there and stuff like that. Trying to troll and talking about, oh, he's relevant because of Drake this and Drake that. And, or, oh, it wasn't really something that I liked all too much. Shit like that. It's definitely polarizing. Don't get me wrong. But, you tuned in. I'll say that. You watched it. You were one of 133.5 million people on average who watched it. Something drew you in. There was something that you wanted to see. And you more than likely saw it, but you still deny it or just don't really give it the recognition it probably deserves. There's a lot to be said about the sheer weight of it, given the fact that the current president was in attendance. And you have a message like that being conveyed, and some people didn't necessarily take to that either. But personally, as a person that has listened to Kendrick Lamar since 2012, if you have the comments like that, like I mentioned earlier, you're more than entitled to them, but you also inherently miss the point of his music. And that's really what the halftime show came down to. The whole point is to be outside of that little box that so many pop artists and a lot of the hip hop artists today get trapped into. With just making, I guess, how do I say? They get so accustomed to making this bite-sized, consumable music that is meant to appease to the masses. They get so accustomed to this cycle of recyclable, even lyrics, beat selection, etc. All for profit in fame and recognition. That's how the music industry is today. The music that Kendrick Lamar makes is not catered to that. It's catered to the masses, but on a different lens. The people that you don't see in these positions, the minorities, the people who have rough upbringings and come from rough neighborhoods, the people who deal with a lot of the social justice and economic and political issues that are prevalent in the world, in the country, by and large, today. His music is made to address those external problems and also address internal problems within groups of minorities, black people, Hispanic people, Latino people, etc. Because as much craziness goes on in terms of getting that kind of stuff from the outside, it also happens within. It addresses that and allows room for some form of conversation, some form of understanding about it, so that these people, instead of doing all this, can uplift each other in these times. That's what the music is for. It's not meant to cater to the poppy people or the popular mass. It's not meant for that. And if you think it's supposed to, you're missing the point. Now, again, some songs of his do have that kind of reach over time because of a specific line in some cases, because of how catchy a specific song is. That's generally going to happen with any artist sometimes. If you get that kind of combination, no matter what type of audience your music is catered to, it's going to get into the mainframe because that's just how it works. But it's not its original intent. There's always something. And you're supposed to sit down and let it simmer in and think about it. And that's another thing too. That is another thing too. Like, do you want to say that you don't know the symbolism because you genuinely don't, which again, maybe you don't necessarily get it on the first listen. That happens with even the deepest of Kendrick Lamar fans. But are you not willing? Do you not want to understand? That's the difference. And I'm sure that a lot of the people who just don't want to understand the message are making up a lot of these comments. I'm not going to say that it was necessarily... I think it's one of the better halftime shows. I'm not saying it was the best, but I'm not about to go say that it was bad in any sense of the imagination. Not to mention, too, that as multiple people have stated, halftime shows are usually pre-recorded. They were setting up everything as the halftime show was taking place, I should say. They were setting material up then. This was on the fly. And the whole point was to allow the man the opportunity to express his raw emotions and true storytelling. right then and right there. Not trying to necessarily, obviously you'll have some stuff schemed up with the choreography and stuff like that. That's different. But the actual music was live. You can hear him, despite the sound mixing being a bit of controversy as well. I will say that was not a bright spot for this. But even if it was a little lower than it should have been for a live audience, you can hear him reciting his own lyrics in real time. You don't see a lot of that with halftime shows. And he's literally the first solo rap artist to get a nod for this as well. The first one. And it's well deserved too. Though again, Kendrick Lamar has been quite literally one of the most successful solo acts. One of the most successful. On a global stage, you're not finding rap artists taking home a Pulitzer Prize for an album. There's no way that it should have taken this long for a solo rap act to get this kind of nod. And especially in Kendrick Lamar's case. So again, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But just be very certain of why you're taking this stance. And also, you can't try to ruin it for anybody else. That's all I'd say for that. But I certainly had a grand time watching it. As far as the other news, there are a lot of international games on the way. To start out, they first stated that a game will be played in Melbourne, Australia in 2026, a regular season game. And the Rams will be slated to play in that one. Obviously, since it's so far away, they're not necessarily going to have the full game set up. But we'll have to see how that develops in the coming months. As well as another game planned for Dublin, Ireland next year. In that one, the Steelers are going to play against whatever team they so choose. They're just trying to expand the game. They've been on this initiative for quite a while, so honestly, regular season games in different countries, honestly, it's been happening in London. They've expanded to Germany. It's not so far-fetched that they're choosing all of these different areas now. And again, people do keep throwing around that a Super Bowl could be played internationally. It would be surprising. It would really depend on the location. But honestly, that's another thing that could be on the way. As they continue to expose different places around the world to the game of American football. The Jags would hire Grant Udinski as the acting offensive coordinator after looking into him previously. Liam Cohen stated that he's still going to be the true offensive coordinator calling the plays, but you have someone there in place of Press Taylor, and that is how you do it. Virginia Halas McCaskey, the daughter of NFL co-founder George Halas, and former coach as well, passed away at the age of 102. She had taken over ownership of the team in 1983, and she had held that position up until her passing. Definitely a staple of the NFL, regardless of the different sentiments that some Bears fans or so might have about her. I mean, literally, the direct lineage from one of the NFL co-founders back in 1920. That is just insane to think about. So, truthfully, I know a lot of people were reeling about it. I believe that her relatives are probably going to take ownership of the team. It's going to stay in the family most likely. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah. Moving on into a few more hires here. The 49ers would hire Gus Bradley, the now former Colts defensive coordinator. The Eagles and Chiefs prior to the game elevated Brandon Graham and Steven Nelson off of IR in the practice squad respectively. And Brandon Graham, it definitely paid off for him. But Steven Nelson, I don't know. The Saints did come out with a report saying that they were very interested in hiring Kellen Moore after the Super Bowl, and they went through with it, giving him a contract, and he'll probably be coaching Derek Carr while also calling plays. And it's an interesting contrast because I saw something yesterday where it was mentioned that he played Derek Carr in 2011 when he was at Boise State as a quarterback, and they won 57-7. So imagine that you have to deal with that guy, who Moore is now the youngest head coach in the NFL. You have to deal with that guy telling you how to play ball. That's got to be a tough reality for Derek Carr to face, though. He could do well in a Kellen Moore offense, but I feel like they just need to move on from him and get somebody more talented. They have to. You've got to get younger at that position at some point. You can't try to hang on to that forever because he's just not that reliable. The Titans would come out with a report stating that they were open to trading the number 1 overall pick. And granted, you need trenches. You need a lot. If Travis Hunter is really the number 1 overall pick, as great of a player as he is coming out of college, wide receiver isn't necessarily the position of need for them. So it would probably be best, and you can probably get a few players back. You get a good amount of draft capital for the number 1 overall pick as well. The 49ers would allow Deebo Samuel Sr. to seek a trade after the worst season of his career by far. I mean, there's no debate about that one. It would be interesting to see what teams are willing to take him on. I mean, at the peak of his powers, he's an exceptional weapon for any squad. But I'm not necessarily sure who would take him right now. A few teams could use an upgrade, though. The Jets would inform Aaron Rodgers that they would seek to move on from him. I mean, I guess it's kind of been building up to this point. It's just not been a fun time in New York for anybody. And it was such an anticlimactic situation in general. I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers coming in, everybody thinking that he's going to be the person to revitalize the organization, and you just get disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. No matter how much talent they brought in too, no matter how good their defense was year in and year out. Though I guess last season they regressed a little bit at some of the worst possible times. And even with you bringing in the offensive weapons that you did, like a Devontae Adams, like a Braylon Allen to complement Breece Hall, and shit was not working. And a lot of it had to do with Aaron Rodgers. A man that is now 41 years old. Yeah, dude, it would probably be best to just move on and build out your roster, honestly, before seeking out another quarterback, for real. because there are some other things that could be, I guess, restructured. And to be honest, again, the Jets, they're bad enough, but the talent in this class does not necessarily command a lot of that attention. So I don't think it would be worth it, personally, to seek out a quarterback in this draft if you're the Jets. But I feel like they're making the right decision in terms of moving on from him. Gonna spend a little second going over the NFL honors because the way shit shaped up, oh my gosh. So, in short, for just a few things, Lamar Jackson got robbed, but again, either way, Josh Allen gets it, whatever. Lamar Jackson gets it, whatever. Neither of them got the job done. And honestly, that's why I say that Jackson, Allen, the Giants in general, those guys are some of the biggest losers in light of the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. I mean, goodness gracious. You look at the seasons that Allen and Jackson had, and they're prolific as shit. Even Joe Burrow, they're prolific. And they get more praise than Jalen Hurts has. Though, again, Lamar Jackson is a little more polarizing. He definitely has gotten the praise and respect, whereas Jalen Hurts simply has not. And all of them have put up the numbers to back up that talk to an extent. But Burrow at least has beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. But he isn't a Super Bowl winner. He's not a Super Bowl MVP. And for Jackson and Allen, you mean to tell me that Jalen Hurts, despite him having all these deficiencies that people want to point out, managed to play against this man in the Super Bowl multiple times and outplay him in both, while also winning against him on the biggest stage? Something that neither of those two can say that they have done in the postseason. And I know the AFC is tougher. I get that. The Chiefs are not necessarily an unstoppable force, especially what the Eagles did to them. But they're an annual contender. We get that. But at some point, one of y'all got to get over the hump. One of y'all has to do it. Jalen Hurts can hold that over them and say that not only did he do this, but he's gotten a Super Bowl quicker than either of them have. And he's an MVP in the Super Bowl. Now they're behind the 8 ball and they have to catch up to what he has done. And as for the Giants, yeah, they're going to keep on paying the price for this. They did it to themselves because they thought that Daniel Jones, who now is on the Vikings practice squad, you decided that he was worth all that money and you wanted to give all of it to an underwhelming quarterback prospect instead of your best fucking player. That's exactly what you get. And nobody feels sorry for the Giants in that regard. You made your bet, you gotta lay in it, man. As far as comeback player of the year, stuff got weird there too. Like, the criteria for it is strange. I mean, yes, Joe Burrow got hurt last season and ended up having a grand year this year, leading the NFL in touchdowns. But I'm just not sure how Damar Hamlin doesn't get that award if he's in it. I mean, dude, the man literally worked his way back into the league after losing his life And honestly, he had a fairly productive season. He literally worked back from that condition and made something out of it. In that context, what did Joe Burrow truly come back from in comparison to that? I don't know. It's just that's a strange one to me. Also, for some of the ballots too, shit got crazy. We heard about Jim Miller putting Lamar Jackson, or giving Lamar Jackson a 4th place vote in MVP. But I looked at some of the ballots yesterday, and I checked out how things shaped up for Defensive Player of the Year. I kid you not. To preface, Mark Craig is a beat writer for the Vikings, so just keep that in mind for him. And also, Tony DiGiulio works for ESPN. I'm not sure what team he's necessarily affiliated with, but either way, Craig gave Jonathan Grenard a 1st place vote for Defensive Player of the Year. And then DiGiulio gave Andrew Van Ginkel a 1st place vote for Defensive Player of the Year. Now, I don't care if you have affiliations with the Vikings and all that shit. You can't be that biased in a pool of great players this season, like a Zach Bond, like Kyle Hamilton. He got some votes. Didn't end up getting the award, but honestly, it makes sense for him to get some attention. I know that both of them had good seasons, but 1st place vote worthy seasons for both of them? And over guys like Patrick Surtain II, who ended up winning the award. Trey Hendrickson led the league in sacks. He was up for the award. TJ Watt was up for the award. Like, wow, it's bold. Like, maybe they could have gotten some votes, but damn, to give them the very first, put them in the 1st place slot is wild to me. A few more things happened. Like, for instance, the Cowboys decided to hire Ken Dorsey to coordinate the passing game as the man from the Browns' offensive system that led them to the worst overall offense in terms of points per game and a paltry offense in the passing game for the Browns. Now, granted, they were rotating different quarterbacks around, and to some extent at this point, Dak Prescott should be better than Deshaun Watson, but what makes you think that he can have control of an efficient passing game? It had not happened. And it feels to me too like part of those deficiencies are what got him scapegoated out of Buffalo. Now, he probably could have stayed there and been fine. But there was clearly a decline there in Josh Allen's ability to produce in some capacity. Part of that was Josh Allen's own decision making, don't get it fucked up. But the schemes are just clearly not on point if they can just hunt you down like this. So I can't necessarily sit here and tell you that I trust that move. I just really fail to understand what the Cowboys are doing. That's it. I don't know. The Bills would re-sign their backup offensive lineman Alec Anderson to a 1-year deal, and C.J. Ham, the Vikings fullback, is slated to undergo a procedure. Travis Kelce is stating that he will need time to decide on a potential retirement. He had been teasing it for quite a while, so that's not necessarily surprising. But most recently, Germaine Pratt, the linebacker of the Cincinnati Bengals, would request a trade. It feels like there's a market for him. I mean, this last season was his best statistical season. I mean, 6 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, and 143 combined tackles, along with 5 TFLs and 4 quarterback hits. I mean, he held down the fort in the middle of the field. Now, granted, you could take that with a grain of salt. I mean, as the anchor of a very horrible Bengals defense, some of those numbers might be a little skewed. I mean, of course, you're going to have more opportunities to pick up some different numbers when you are consistently on the field. But there could be some teams that could be in use of a middle linebacker upgrade. Seems like somebody should be giving the Bengals a call. It certainly has to do with money. It has to do with money. I guarantee you. They do not have enough capital to keep all of their star talent. Naturally, players are going to expect a little more. I'm not necessarily sure that's the angle Germaine Pratt is taking, but he definitely wants an extension, and the Bengals may not necessarily be willing to give him what he thinks he's owed. So he about to throw up the deuces and get out of there. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.